Hello, my name is Ashish Koirala. I am a member of the Kathmandu University technical team executing the server localization based on OpenIMIS application platform. For implementation of a Linux-based server installation, we are going to demonstrate Ubuntu server targeting a decentralized server on a particular region. The minimum requirements while developing an instance is shown here. This is for a particular instance where the Ubuntu needs to be of at least version 18.04 with 2 vCPUs, 2 GB of RAM and at least 25 GB of hard drive memory. As well as the recommended requirement for a single instance for a particularly smaller region is Ubuntu 20.04 with 2 vCPU, 2 GB of RAM and 50 GB of hard drive memory. Whereas for a centralized server and including a larger number of different areas and different regions, Ubuntu 20.04 is recommended with 4 vCPU, 6 GB of RAM and 500 GB of hard drive memory. So all these instances, as we call it and as it's commonly popular in AWS, whereas droplets are fairly common and it's widely popular from DigitalOcean. We can create and we can buy these instances from different cloud server service providers like DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, AWS and such. So now let us move on with the server implementation process. According to the documentation of the guidelines provided, the first point talks about the SSH implementation. So every cloud service provider provides SSH option to help developers communicate with the server. Let us install a SSH client. Click on the link. It will redirect us to the PuTTY download page. I have already downloaded and installed the PuTTY. The installation is quite common and very easy. As I have already downloaded it, it will just show me the options of repair and remove. You can download it and install it on your preferred device and preferred drive. So let me just open my PuTTY, and after a successful installation, PuTTY looks like this. The hostname and IP address is the IP address provided by the cloud service provider. In my case, it's 128.199.21.216. The port number here is the port number that helps us to connect with the Linux server. So SSH client is doing its job to search this port number along this IP address such that it can communicate with the Linux server. So let's just put all those settings in the default settings. Click open. Now I want to log in as root with root privilege and I'll provide my password. So if it's your first time logging into your server using PuTTY, the server will ask you to change your password. And according to the password provided by the cloud server service provider, you can change your password accordingly. After changing the password, the interface will look like this and we can move on ahead with our next step. We now will be installing the MS SQL server in Linux environment. OpenIMIS application uses MS SQL service as their primary server. So here MS SQL server is going to be installed in Linux environment. We can just copy the required steps into our PuTTY. This is MS SQL Server 2017. You can install the latest version also. Here we have got the root privilege. That's why we can use the sudo keyword. It's also recommendable not to use the sudo keyboard, but if you are just a user with the sudo privileges, you need to use this sudo keyword in your different entries. So here the dependency error is showing that two different dependencies are not installable. So I have also provided the different steps to install these dependencies. So let us first install GNU-P2. And let's install everything one by one. This will help us install the two different dependencies accordingly. In cases like this, you can just create a notepad and see if there's any problem. So now install the required dependency. Okay, so we have used the wget 5.10. Here it needs to be 5.10 as well. Yes, so it's installed. I'll edit it. So now let's install the SQL Server again. So now our SQL Server is installed. Now let's install the required SQL Server application installation. Here it will show us different edition of SQL Server. We need to download the third one. So let's input the keyword 3 and we accept the license terms. It's asking us about the SQL Server System Administration password. This will be your server password, so be careful while providing the password to the party. And it will check if the both password matches with each other, then it will provide you the details that the setup has completed successfully. So now, to provide a very intuitive and very expressive way of using our Linux server and providing different type of input into our Linux server such that it can handle the operation, we need to install MS SQL tools also. I've just copied the 7 point and let's just install this again. This will install the MS SQL tools as well, such that we can use our PuTTY and our Linux environment to communicate with our server. So now we have a server that is working. We can also check if it's working or not. And we can see here that our MS SQL server is working right now. It's a Microsoft based SQL service database engine. So now we can also install the Microsoft SQL Server Management tool such that we can load a script into it and create a certain databases. So now let us install the Microsoft SQL Server Management tool, which is a management tool that helps us to manage our SQL server. You can click on this URL that will take us to our Microsoft homepage of SQL Server Management Studio. We can download the latest SQL Server Management Studio and install it. I've already installed it in my system. If there were any such complication in the installations, I would have shown it, but this installation is quite simple and common. And after a very successful implementation and installation, you need to open the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio 18. Once the Management Studio opens, the interface will look just like this. Click the Connect button and Database Engine. Put your IP address here. And then click on the Authentication drop-down menu. Use the SQL Server Authentication. Login. On login, you need to provide SA as an admin, and password is the same that you have provided while installing the server. Now it will take us to the server database. Now the databases are empty, hence we need to provide a newer database here. So this is how the newer database interface will look like, and we need to provide the database name here. So because we are going to provide the SQL Server database query to this Management Studio, let us just move on with the next guideline to just deplete any confusion that might come in the future. Let's click on the link. It will take us to the source code file of the database MS SQL Server. We just need the script file from here. So let us download this SQL files, the zip. You can unzip the SQL files and you will see there are 5 different SQL queries, and you can choose the full demo database in which there are already some data present in the SQL, as well as you can also use the full empty database. We'll be using the full demo database because it's always good to find some data in it for testing. So now open your Microsoft SQL Management Server, create a new database, and let's put the name OpenIMIS 1.7.2 according to the release version of the OpenIMIS. Let's press OK. It will create a new database with the name OpenIMIS 1.7.2. Let's click here, Open File, and let's click on the full demo database. It is going to load all the SQL queries here. You can just press no, and it will create a certain database with different tables and associates on the required database. After this, you need to press execute button, but make sure the required database is being selected. So the query execution requires some time to integrate all the queries into the database. Now let's check if there are any errors in the row implementation and the query implementation to the database. There are no such errors while integrating these queries into the database. And if you find any errors, you can contact OpenIMIS service desk, or you can email me as well. So let's get on to the security login part, because we need to create a user with the privilege and access to this database. Click on login, right click and click on the new login. It will open a new login interface. Provide the username and provide a password very carefully. This will be the password for your login user that will help you access to this database. Make sure the password expiration is unchecked. Make sure the server role is on public, as well as on the user mapping part. Click on the desired database and click on the owner. Make sure that the status is granted for permission to connect to database engine, as well as login is enabled. Click on OK now. Make sure there's a user that you have just created on the login department. Till now, we have successfully implemented Microsoft SQL Server, our database, and now the process of front-end and back-end integration of OpenIMIS application needs to be implemented. So now let's take a look on the guidelines provided. So here on the fourth section, I have recommended to install WinSCP because we are going to clone the GitHub libraries in our subfolders. So here WinSCP helps to transfer files from desktop to our Linux-based server, as well as it also helps us in the process of knowing different folders and knowing the different directories as well. So let's click on the URL. You can download the WinSCP application from here. The installation here is quite simple, and you can install it this way. So after installation, your WinSCP application will look like this. Enter the host number, it's the same number of IP addresses that you've been given. The port number it uses is also 22. Let's put it on default. The username is the name of the user. I have the admin privilege, I have the root privilege, so I'm using the root user, and provide the password. You can just add it, and you can see that it's showing you the Linux-based server directories of different folders and subfolders with system files as well. Now let's take a look at this guideline. Now we are going to implement both the front-end and back-end module into our Linux-based server. Let's click on this URL. It is redirecting us to the OpenIMIS component assembling all front-end modules. This has been developed with the help of JavaScript as well as React as a whole. So we will implement this in our Linux-based server. We can just copy the HTTPS code of this GitHub repo and then open our PuTTY . Let's make a directory inside home. It is empty now. Now let's clone the link we have just copied, and let's clone all the modules inside it. So as we can see, we've got a folder of OpenIMIS fe_js. This is for a front-end module as well as for the back-end module. Let's open the back-end. This is also the assembly of different back-end modules, and we can just copy this for the GitHub clone in our required working directory. Let's clone this as well. And we can see that there are two different folders being cloned in our Linux-based server. We can also take a look at this by going into Home. Let's refresh this. By going to Home, we can see an OpenIMIS folder here. And we can see two different folders being implemented, which we have just cloned into our Linux-based server. So now we move to the fourth point here, and now before implementing the backend and front-end module, we need to install a web server first. And although there are many different web servers with providing service of web server, I have chosen to install Nginx because of its load balancing techniques and its faster performance as well as flexibility. So to install Nginx, let's update our dependencies, our different applications first. Now let's install Nginx. So now let's allow our web server to perform. For this, let's just allow our HTTP server for now. And let's see if our service of Nginx is running or not. So it's actively running right now. So here, after our Nginx server is enabled, we need to implement the server implementation, where we need to change some proxy inputs into our web server. So here we will open our project, and under this directory there is a file named default, where we need to provide our necessary data such that we will provide our proxy address, and it will populate the required essentials according to the proxy path, and it will show all the necessary requirements in our URL. So here sudo is for the admin privilege, nano is a text editor, Nginx sites available, that's default. We can see that by default Nginx provides us with a very unique configuration file for the web server. And if we try to open our server, it will show us that our Nginx has been enabled successfully. We can just copy this. We can delete the whole data in here. We can just create a new proxy path. And here we need to provide this accordingly, and I'm giving the proxy path credentials here with 1000 because the backend will be using in the OpenIMIS backend implementation will be using the port number 8000. So let's just use Control X, save this, and it's saved. And we can just system sheet here, restart Nginx. And if we try to refresh it, there's a bad gateway because it tries to get onto the proxy pass of 8000, and because we are not enabling the backend of OpenIMIS yet, it will show us a 502 bad gateway error. So we have successfully implemented the Nginx web server. Now, as I looked into the different modules of OpenIMIS, the front end and back end, there are some dependencies we need to install for a smooth flow of installation and implementation. So let's install this on our server accordingly. Press Y. Now, let's see if we can get some more dependencies from here. Most probably, it will add some new dependencies as well from the Python development dependency. Now, let's install the Unix ODBC driver dependencies that we will need in our backend integration. Now let's install the PIP. For PIP, inducing different operations that we'll need in our server implementation. Now let's install this MySQL dependency for the Django, which will help us enable some dependency we'll need for our database management in our backend integration. Now, after installing some useful dependencies for the smooth operation of our installation, we move on to the enabling of OpenIMIS backend module. So for this, inside the cloned directory of OpenIMIS, we cloned the directory inside of home. Let's see, there's a directory called OpenIMIS, and let's go to the first one, OpenIMIS by_py, which is the backend directory. So here we need to install some external OpenIMIS dependencies. You can copy it and paste it and install the required dependencies. So now we have installed some external dependencies. So it's not that important, but let's also include some development dependencies that is provided within this entry. So here some few new dependencies has been installed, and now from the OpenIMIS.json file within the backend service, here let's generate some required modules. Let's copy this, and the modules has been acquired. You can see that the significant modules requirements.txt has been created. So now let's install the required modules. As it's installing the required modules, let's create an .env file with following details. Here, if we open the WinSCP software and get to the OpenIMIS location, here we can see there is no .env file. So we need to provide a .env file such that the backend would be able to connect with the database. So let's create a .env file. Let's use the function nano, and one thing I'd like to make certain is that for users without root privileges, you need to use the sudo as a keyword. Sometimes I may skip and I'll just write the remaining part because I have a root privilege inside this server, but you need to provide the sudo here for some authentication problem that may be seen while authenticating the user into some files. So let's create this sudo nano. We have this in our directory OpenIMIS _b_b_py. So let's create a file named .env, and because it's a new file, it's empty, let's just copy it. Let's just paste it here, and we can input the DB name which I had previously acquired to be this. You can just copy this, paste it, then write the username, which is this, along with the password provided. So I guess I am this user, and the password according to the password you provided. So this is my password. And if you use the WinSCP and refresh it here, you will see that .env file. You can even change your keyword entries as well as modify it from here also. So here the DB host, this is for the local host that will be using the local host server inside the Linux server. This is the port it will be listening on, and we will use the Nginx proxy server for proxying the backend server to the main URL. So now after this, you need to get inside the directory of OpenIMIS. So we can see there are lots of directories here. Features OpenIMIS script. Let's get inside OpenIMIS. After that, we need to use python manage.py migrate. Inside here, there's a file named manage.py, which has been coded in such a way that it will help us migrate the necessary files. Here, an invalid syntax can be seen, and this is usually because I have also installed Python 3. And in such case, you can just use this Python 3 keyword for the operation. It is searching for database, and it's providing the migration facility to the database. And for every OK, it's just a notification that it is being connected with your database. So now this is done, and now we need to provide a super user for our Django admin console. Let's use this. It's the same error. Let's just make it to Python 3. It will ask me for a username and a password. I'll just type in my name here. So super user created successfully. So at last we did the creation of Python manage.py create super user, and we can also change the password of super user. And in most of the cases, if it doesn't ask you for the password at first, you can just use the change password, and then after you can provide your username. So provide the username you want now, and after that you will be able to log into the Django admin. So now we are on the directory inside of OpenIMIS. Now we need to run our service from here. So let's copy this and run our server. So the same exact problem of Python 3 being implemented. I'll not change it in the guideline, because in most of the times the Python 3 need not be implemented or need not be edited, and in such cases occurs, you can use this implementation. So let's run this. So now you can see that we have started the server at 127.0.18000. So this is how we can implement the server. And now if we try to use the URL of our DigitalOcean provided or cloud server provided URL, we can get to the required backend. There's some error in the process. Let me check this. Okay. So if errors like this happens, you can enter Ctrl+C and close the backend. Now you need to go back to the default directory, which is this, and here there is dev_launch.sh. Now you need to provide, wait, first let's see what's inside dev_launch.sh. So these are the site root is equals to API, row security is equals to false, debug is equals to, and the Python, because we have Python 3 enabled, we need to use this for our launch. Let's see if it's implemented. Yes, it's implemented. Now we can run dev_launch.sh. You can do this if in case there is some error like this while you implement the server. So it shows me that the server is created. Now let's try again. Okay, we need to provide API. Now we need to provide the username and password we used earlier. Now we can use this for our Django administration, and here we can see that it is being implemented, and by this it means that our backend is enabled. Well, now I'm going to show a little trick on Linux side where we can see if the proxy server is running or not. For that you need to write netstat -tulnp. So we have proxy server 1433 running, 22 running, as well as 80 running, and we can kill any of these servers with this keyboard, and the PID is the ID of the program. If you have already implemented the dev launch, also called as the Python server running the server, then you need to provide this kill function to kill the PID accordingly. So now I'll also train you to operate this server in the background for the development phase, so we can integrate the front end as well. For that, you can use certain keyword known as no-hop, and just start the program like this with an and at last, which is also known as apostrophe. This will help you run the application in the background. After that, just type in jobs, and this will run in the background. For that, you can also search it yourself. Now at proxy address 1000, Python 3 is running which is also our server. This is the server. So it's running. Now let's try implementing the front end side. So now, after the implementation of the backend, and now we need to implement the front end also. So let's walk through according to the guidelines provided. So after we have successfully implemented the application backend on our Linux server, we need to implement the front end as well. So at first, the first step shows that we need to change Nginx proxy server. Let's just copy this, paste here. It will show us the Nginx proxy server. And one change is that we need to change the proxy path from 8000 to 3000. This is because the front end proxy path needs to be implemented on the 3000, while the 8000 is for the database and the backend. So after we implemented all the backend, and we know that the backend is running and being implemented very well, we need to implement the front end, and the backend is autonomously being implemented according to the code provided from the front end. Now the second steps are we need to install Node. I guess I have already installed it while I was doing another program as well. So let's see. Okay, so it's asking me to install Node.js from here. This is the same code here. Let's just copy this and paste it there. This will install the required Node, because the front end is also developed in Node as well. And then we will need to install Yarn. Let's copy this. Let's install. That has been installed. So let's see if Yarn is been installed by checking the version of Yarn. Let's also see if Node is installed as well. So yeah, both are installed. Now enter the directory of cloned OpenIMIS frontend JavaScript. So here, right now, our present working directory is b_py. That is our backend folder. So let's get back and let's see where we are. We are on the OpenIMIS main folder. Let's see the contents. Let's get inside our front end. So we can see OpenIMIS JSON, and we need to implement our module dependency from OpenIMIS.json. Here, let's copy this, and it's been done in milliseconds. After implementing the module dependencies from OpenIMIS.json, we need to install the dependencies by the help of Yarn. Let's copy this. I'll also change this. This is installing all the front-end incorporation of different modules from the application, which helps us to integrate the front-end module with the back-end one. Because it's taking much time, I will just fast forward this for the completion. So after the completion, the putty and the different operations looks like this. We have found a success on save log file as well as the post install. It's also done. So now we can start the yarn, which will start our process. And by default, this will start in the proxy server 3000. After the compilation is successful, this will open on the 3000 proxy server, which has been modified to be open on our URL. So if this error is still there, this means that we need to restart our Nginx service. Let's got this. System ctl restart Nginx. So there must be an error right now, and if we start the yarn now, the application will be shown in the URL address. So we can see that we have successfully compiled it again. And now if we try to open the server, we can see that the front end is implemented. And because we have used the demo version, we have some data present here by itself. And now we've successfully implemented both the front end and back end database as well as server integration successfully.